I wasn't supposed to hesitate. Not when I had her in my crosshairs. Not when Washington was counting on me to finish the job. But I did hesitate. And in that single frozen breath, that moment when my finger hovered over the trigger and her eyes found mine through the rain-streaked window, I lost everything I had spent my entire life building. They tell you in training that the enemy is faceless. That loyalty to your country is absolute. That love is a weakness you cannot afford. They were right about all of it. But they never told me what happens when the enemy has a face you can't forget. When loyalty becomes a cage. When love doesn't feel like weakness, it feels like the only truth left in a world built on lies. Moscow, in 1984, was a city of shadows. The kind of place where every street corner held a secret. Every conversation was a transaction, and trust was the rarest currency of all. I arrived in late September, when the first frost had begun to bite at the edges of the Moskva River, and the air smelled like diesel and damp wool. I was Michael Reed then, at least that's what my passport said. My real name doesn't matter anymore. Names are just another cover story in this line of work. I was 32 years old, a CIA field operative with 6 years of experience under my belt, and I believed in what I was doing. I believed in America. I believed in the mission. I believed that the world was divided into two sides, and ours was the right one. They sent me to Moscow with a single objective: locate and eliminate Viktor Marchenko, a rogue Soviet weapons dealer who had gotten his hands on nuclear blueprints stolen from a research facility in Chelyabinsk. Marchenko wasn't loyal to Moscow or Washington. He was loyal to money, and he was planning to sell those blueprints to the highest bidder, possibly the Chinese, possibly someone worse. My orders were clear. Find him. Neutralize the threat. Get out. Clean. Quiet. No traces. That's how it was supposed to go. I spent the first 3 weeks building my cover. I posed as a West German journalist working on a story about Soviet industrial policy. One rented a small apartment in the Arbat district, a place with thin walls and a view of a crumbling courtyard where old women hung laundry on rusted lines. I learned the rhythms of the city, the metro schedules, the times when the KGB surveillance shifts changed, the cafes where you could sit for hours without drawing attention. I became invisible. That's the first rule of fieldwork. Blend in so completely that even your own reflection forgets you're there. I made contact with my asset in early October. His name was Dmitri, a low-level bureaucrat in the Ministry of Defense who had been feeding us information for 2 years. We met in Gorky Park, near the frozen pond where children used to skate before the ice cracked too thin to trust. Dmitri was nervous. He always was. He smoked cheap cigarettes and kept glancing over his shoulder like a man who knew his days were numbered. He handed me a folded newspaper. Inside was a single piece of paper with an address scrawled in Cyrillic. Marchenko's safe house. Dmitri told me Marchenko would be there in 3 days. He also told me something else, something that should have changed everything, but I didn't understand it yet. He said, "They know someone is coming. They sent insurance." I didn't ask what he meant by insurance. I should have. The night I first saw her, the snow was falling in thick, silent curtains. It was the kind of snow that muffles sound, that makes the world feel smaller and more dangerous all at once. I was stationed in an abandoned apartment across the street from Marchenko's safe house, a decaying building with boarded windows and walls that smelled like mildew and old cigarettes. I had been watching for 2 days. Marchenko hadn't shown. But I wasn't worried. Patience is the second rule of fieldwork. You wait. You watch. You learn that she appeared just after midnight. I almost didn't notice her at first. She moved like smoke, fluid, deliberate, nearly invisible. She wore a long black coat and a wool scarf that covered half her face. Her hair was dark, pulled back tight. She walked without hurry, without fear, and that's what made me look twice. Everyone in Moscow walked with fear in 1984. It was in the hunch of their shoulders, the quickness of their steps, the way they avoided eye contact. But not her. She walked like she owned the street, like the shadows answered to her. I watched through my binoculars as she stopped in front of Marchenko's building. She didn't knock. She didn't look around. She just stood there for a moment, perfectly still, as if listening to something I couldn't hear. Then she slipped inside. No forced entry. No hesitation. She had a key. Or she didn't need one. I felt my pulse quicken. This wasn't part of the plan. Who was she? KGB? One of Marchenko's contacts? I adjusted my scope, training it on the second-floor window where I knew Marchenko kept his office. The lights were off. Minutes passed. Then I saw movement. A shadow crossing the window. Her. She was inside. I made a decision. I grabbed my Beretta, checked the suppressor, and moved. The street was empty. The snow covered my footsteps. I reached the building in less than a minute, slipping through the side entrance Dmitri had mapped out for me. The stairwell was dark, the air thick with the smell of rotting wood and rust. I climbed slowly, my breath shallow, every muscle coiled. I reached the second floor. The door to Marchenko's office was ajar. I could see the faint glow of a desk lamp inside. I pushed the door open with my shoulder, my gun raised. And that's when I saw him. Viktor Marchenko. Slumped in his chair, his head tilted back at an unnatural angle, his throat opened cleanly from ear to ear. Blood pooled on the desk, soaking into papers covered in Cyrillic handwriting and technical diagrams. He had been dead less than 5 minutes. The blood was still warm, and she was standing over him, holding a knife. We locked eyes. Her scarf had slipped down, and I could see her face clearly for the first time. High cheekbones, sharp jawline, eyes the color of winter ice, pale blue and impossibly cold. She was younger than I expected, maybe 28, maybe 30. Beautiful in a way that felt dangerous, like staring into a fire you know will burn you. She didn't flinch, didn't move, just stood there, knife in hand, studying me the way a predator studies prey. I raised my gun, aimed at her chest. My finger rested on the trigger. I had a clean shot. I should have taken it, but I didn't, because in that moment, I realized something that turned my blood cold. She had been sent to do exactly what I had been sent to do. Marchenko was dead. The mission was over. But we were still standing there, 2 ghosts in a room full of corpses. And neither of us was pulling the trigger. "Who are you?" I asked. My voice was steady, but my heart was hammering. She didn't answer. She tilted her head slightly, studying me with those ice-cold eyes. Then she wiped the blade on Marchenko's sleeve, folded the knife with practiced precision, and slipped it into her coat. She moved toward the door, toward me. I should have stopped her. I should have put a bullet in her before she took another step. But I didn't. I stepped aside, and she walked past me, so close I could smell the faint trace of her perfume, something floral and dark, like roses left too long in the rain. She paused in the doorway, looked back at me, and for the first time, I saw something flicker in her eyes. Not fear, not curiosity. Something else. Something I couldn't name. Then she was gone, disappeared into the shadows like she had never been there at all. I stood there for a long time, staring at Marchenko's body, trying to make sense of what had just happened. My mission was complete. Marchenko was dead, but I hadn't been the one to kill him. And the woman who had, the ghost in the black coat, had walked away. And I had let her. I knew even then that I had made a mistake. I just didn't know how big. I reported back to Langley the next morning through a coded transmission. I told them Marchenko was dead. I told them the mission was a success. I didn't tell them about her. I told myself it didn't matter, that she was irrelevant, that she had done my job for me, and I should be grateful. But I couldn't stop thinking about her, about the way she had looked at me, about the fact that she could have killed me, and she didn't, just like I could have killed her. And ID in single quotes T. 2 days later, I saw her again. I was sitting in a small cafe near Pushkin Square, drinking bitter coffee and pretending to read a newspaper. The cafe was crowded, filled with workers on their lunch breaks and students huddled over textbooks. I wasn't expecting to see her, but she walked in, bought a cup of tea, and sat down at the table directly across from mine. She didn't look at me, didn't acknowledge me, just sat there, stirring her tea slowly, her eyes fixed on the window. I felt my pulse spike. This wasn't a coincidence. She had found me. Or maybe I had never been hidden at all. I watched her from behind my newspaper, trying to read her. She was dressed differently now. A simple gray sweater, jeans, her hair loose around her shoulders. She looked almost normal, almost human. But I knew better. I had seen what she could do. After a few minutes, she stood up, walked to the counter, paid for her tea, and as she turned to leave, she dropped something on my table. A small folded piece of paper. She didn't say a word, didn't look back, just walked out into the gray Moscow afternoon. I waited until she was gone and unfolded the paper. It was a single line written in English. Gorky Park, tomorrow, noon, come alone. I stared at the note for a long time, my mind racing. This was a trap. It had to be. She was KGB, or FSB, or something worse. She was luring me out into the open, so she could finish what she hadn't finished in Marchenko's office. I should have burned the note. Should have packed my things and gotten on the next flight out of Moscow. But I didn't, because somewhere deep inside, beneath all the training and the discipline and the years of learning to bury my emotions, I wanted to know. I wanted to know who she was, why she had let me leave, and why she was reaching out now. So I went. Gorky Park was nearly empty when I arrived. The trees were bare, their branches black against the pale sky. The pond was frozen solid, covered in a thin layer of snow that no one had bothered to clear. I walked slowly, scanning the area for signs of surveillance, for backup, for anything that felt wrong. But there was nothing. Just the cold and the silence and the distant hum of the city beyond the park's iron gates. She was sitting on a bench near the pond. Same black coat. Same scarf. She didn't look up when I approached. I sat down next to her, keeping a careful distance between us. For a long time, neither of us spoke. We just sat there, two strangers pretending to watch the frozen water. Finally, she broke the silence. Her voice was low, accented, but her English was flawless. "You should have killed me." I didn't respond. "Why didn't you?" she asked, turning to look at me for the first time. Her eyes were just as cold as I remembered. But there was something else there now. Something that looked almost like curiosity. "Why didn't you?" I replied. She smiled. It was a small, sad smile. "Maybe I'm tired of killing. Maybe you're lying. Maybe." We sat in silence again. I could feel the weight of my gun pressing against my ribs. I knew she was armed, too. We were two predators sitting side by side, pretending to be human. It was absurd. It was dangerous. And yet, I didn't leave. "My name is Irina," she said quietly. "Irina Volkov." "Michael," I said, though I wasn't sure why I was giving her even that much. "I know," she said, and the way she said it, so calm, so matter of fact, sent a chill down my spine. She knew who I was. She had known all along. "Who do you work for?" I asked. "Does it matter?" "It might." She looked away, back toward the frozen pond. "I work for people who don't care about me. Just like you." She wasn't wrong. I had spent 6 years of my life serving an agency that saw me as a tool, a weapon, expendable. I had told myself it was for a greater cause, for freedom, for democracy, for all the things I had been taught to believe in. But sitting there next to her, in the freezing cold of a Moscow park, I realized how hollow those words had become. "Why did you want to meet?" I asked. "Because you're going to leave soon," she said. "And I wanted to see you one more time before you did." "Why?" She didn't answer right away. She reached into her coat and pulled out a small red scarf. It was folded neatly, the fabric worn and faded. She held it in her hands, running her thumb over the edge. "My mother gave this to me," she said softly, "before she died. She told me to hold on to it, to remember where I came from, to remember that I was still human." She looked at me, and for the first time, I saw something vulnerable in her eyes. "But I'm not sure I am anymore." I didn't know what to say, so I said nothing. And we sat there together, two ghosts in a frozen park, holding on to the last fragile pieces of ourselves. I should have walked away that day. I should have returned to my safe house, packed my things, and disappeared. But I didn't, because something had shifted, something I didn't fully understand yet. Irina had shown me a part of herself, a crack in the armor, and I couldn't unsee it. I started seeing her regularly after that, always in public places, always careful, always watching for surveillance. We would meet in cafes, in parks, in the back corners of bookstores where no one paid attention. We never stayed long. We never said much. But slowly, carefully, we began to talk. Not about our missions or our agencies, or the secrets we carried, but about everything else. About the lives we had left behind. About the people we used to be before we became what we were now. She told me about growing up in Leningrad, about her father, a naval officer who drank too much and disappeared when she was 12, about her mother, who worked in a factory and died of pneumonia when Irina was 17, about how she had been recruited by the FSB when she was 20, plucked from a military academy because she was fast and smart and had nothing left to lose. She told me about her first kill, a defector in Prague. She said she cried for 3 days afterward. She said she never cried again. I told her about Pennsylvania, about the small town I grew up in, where everyone knew everyone and nothing ever changed. About my father, a steel worker who came home every night covered in soot and exhausted. About my mother, who taught 3rd grade and believed in the goodness of people, even when the world gave her every reason not to. I told her about joining the Marines at 18 because I wanted to serve something bigger than myself. I told her about being recruited by the CIA 3 years later, about how they trained me to lie, to kill, to disappear. I told her about the things I had done in the name of duty, the people I had hurt, the lines I had crossed. I told her things I had never told anyone, and she listened, without judgment, without fear, just listened, like she understood, like she was the only person in the world who could dot we were dangerous together. I knew that. She knew that. But we kept meeting anyway, because for the first time in years, I didn't feel alone. For the first time in years, I felt like I was talking to someone who saw me, not Michael Reed, CIA operative, but the person underneath, the one I had buried so deep I had almost forgotten he existed. The history of espionage is built on betrayal. The CIA and the KGB, later the FSB, have spent decades locked in a silent war, trading secrets and lives like currency. During the Cold War, both sides operated with a single understanding: trust no one. Not your allies, not your assets, and especially not the enemy. Double agents were everywhere. Men and women who pledged loyalty to one side while secretly serving the other. Alder James, Robert Hansen, Oleg Penkovsky, Kim Philby. Some did it for money, some for ideology, some because they had been blackmailed or coerced, and some, a rare few, did it because they stopped believing in the lines that had been drawn for them. I thought about those people often during those weeks in Moscow. I thought about what it must have felt like to stand on the edge of betrayal, to know that one decision, one choice, could unravel everything. I told myself I was different, that I was still loyal, that I was just gathering intelligence. That meeting Irina was part of the job, a way to understand the enemy. But I was lying to myself, and I knew it. The truth is, I was falling, slowly, quietly, like snow accumulating on a roof until the weight of it becomes too much to bear. I was falling for a woman I should have killed, a woman who should have killed me. And every time we met, every time she looked at me with those pale blue eyes and told me something true, I fell a little further. It was late November when everything changed. The temperature had dropped below freezing, and the city was locked in a grip of ice that made every street treacherous. I was supposed to leave Moscow in a week. My mission was complete. Langley had already arranged my exfiltration. All I had to do was wait. But Irina called an emergency meeting. She used a coded signal, a chalk mark on a lamppost near the Kremlin, and I knew it was serious. We met in an old church on the outskirts of the city. It had been abandoned for years, the walls crumbling, the windows shattered. Inside, it was dark and cold, the air thick with the smell of damp stone and decay. Irina was waiting for me near the altar. She looked different, tired, afraid. I had never seen her afraid before. "They know," she said before I could even speak. My blood turned to ice. "Who knows what?" "FSB. They know about us. About our meetings. They've been watching." "How?" "I don't know. But they know. And they gave me new orders." She looked at me, and for the first time, I saw real fear in her eyes. "They told me to kill you." The silence that followed was deafening. I stood there, staring at her, trying to process what she had just said. She was supposed to kill me. That's why she had called this meeting. To finish the job. I should have drawn my gun. Should have defended myself. But I didn't. Because I knew, somehow I knew, that she wasn't going to do it. "When?" I asked quietly. "Tomorrow night. They want proof. A body. They said if I don't, they'll assume I've been compromised." "And have you?" She didn't answer. She didn't need to. The answer was written all over her face. "Come with me," I said. The words left my mouth before I could stop them. She stared at me like I had lost my mind. "What? Come with me?" "I leave in a week. I can get you out. Langley will debrief you. You'll be safe? Safe?" She laughed bitterly. "There is no safe. Not for me. Not for you. If I defect, they'll hunt me for the rest of my life. And if you help me, they'll label you a traitor. You'll lose everything." "I've already lost everything," I said. And I meant it. Because somewhere along the way, without realizing it, I had stopped caring about the mission, about the agency, about the oaths I had sworn. All I cared about was her. She shook her head. "You don't know what you're saying." "Yes, I do. Michael, I'm not leaving you here." She looked at me for a long time. And then, slowly, She reached into her coat. My hand went to my gun instinctively. But she didn't pull out a weapon. She pulled out the red scarf, the one her mother had given her. She held it out to me. "If I do this," she said softly, "I need to know you mean it. I need to know this isn't just a mission to you." I took the scarf from her hands. It was soft and warm, the fabric faded from years of being carried and held. I folded it carefully and slipped it into my pocket. "It's not a mission," I said. It never was. And for the first time since I had met her, Irina Volkov smiled. A real smile. Small and fragile, but real. I spent the next 3 days planning. I contacted Langley through an encrypted channel and told them I had a high-value defector. I didn't tell them who. I didn't tell them why. I just told them I needed an emergency exfiltration for 2. They were suspicious. They asked questions, but I gave them just enough information to make them believe it was worth the risk. They agreed, reluctantly. The exfiltration point was set for December 1st, just outside the city, near a rail yard that had been used for smuggling operations in the past. We would have a 10-minute window. If we missed it, we were on our own. Irina and I met one last time before the exfiltration. It was in the same cafe where she had first left me the note. She looked calm, too calm, like she had made peace with something. We didn't talk much. We just sat there, drinking bad coffee, pretending to be normal people living normal lives. At one point, she reached across the table and took my hand. Her fingers were cold. I held on tight. "If this goes wrong," she said quietly, "I want you to know it's not going to go wrong. Michael, it's not." She nodded, but I could see the doubt in her eyes. And I felt it too, because we both knew the odds. We both knew what we were risking. And we both knew that if we failed, there would be no second chances. December 1st arrived cold and clear. The sky was a pale, washed-out blue, and the air bit at your skin like glass. I arrived at the rail yard an hour early, scouting the area, checking for surveillance, for traps, for anything that felt wrong. It was quiet. Too quiet. I told myself it was fine, that we still had time. But my instincts were screaming at me to run. Irina arrived 10 minutes before the exfiltration window. She was alone. She looked exhausted, like she hadn't slept in days. We didn't say anything. We just moved. The exfiltration point was an old freight car at the far end of the yard. Our contact was supposed to be waiting inside. We reached the car. I pulled the door open, and that's when I saw him. He was young, mid-20s, American probably, a junior operative sent by Langley to facilitate the extraction. But he wasn't alone. There were 3 other men with him, Russians, FSB, and they had guns pointed at us. My heart stopped. This was a trap. Langley had sold us out. Or Irina had. Or both. I didn't know. I didn't have time to know. I reached for my gun. But before I could draw it, Irina stepped in front of me, shielding me. Her voice was calm, cold. "Let him go." One of the Russian agents laughed. "You think you have a choice? Let him go," she repeated. "Or I'll make sure none of you leave here alive. You're outnumbered. I don't care." There was a moment, a single heartbeat of silence, where everything hung in the balance. And then Irina moved. She was faster than I had ever seen her. She pulled a knife from her coat and drove it into the throat of the nearest agent before he could react. The other agents opened fire. I threw myself to the ground, drawing my gun, returning fire. The freight car erupted in chaos. Bullets ricocheted off metal walls. Blood sprayed across rusted steel. I shot one agent in the chest, another in the head. Irina moved like a shadow, her knife flashing in the dim light. The American operative tried to run. I put a bullet in his leg. He went down screaming. When the gunfire stopped, there were 4 bodies on the ground, and Irina was standing over them, breathing hard, blood on her hands. She looked at me, and I looked at her, and in that moment, I realized something. She had known. She had known it was a trap, and she had come anyway, because she trusted me, or because she didn't care anymore, or maybe because, like me, she had stopped believing there was any way out but through. "We have to go," I said. She nodded. We made it out of Moscow by stealing a car and driving north, toward the Finnish border. It took us 3 days. We slept in abandoned buildings, ate stale bread and canned food we stole from a roadside shop, and kept moving. We barely spoke. We were too exhausted, too afraid. But we kept going, because there was no other choice. We crossed the border on foot, through a dense forest covered in snow. It was freezing. My hands were numb. My lungs burned. But we kept walking. And when we finally reached the Finnish side, when we finally saw the lights at a small border town in the distance, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Hope that we stayed in Finland for 2 weeks while Langley processed Irina's debriefing. They questioned her for hours every day. They didn't trust her. They didn't trust me. But eventually, they accepted that she was legitimate, that she had valuable intelligence, that she was worth protecting. They gave her a new identity, a new life, and they reassigned me, sent me back to Washington, told me to forget her, told me it was over, but it wasn't over. It never is. I left the CIA 6 months later. I couldn't do it anymore. Couldn't carry the weight of all the lies, all the betrayals, all the lives I had ruined in the name of duty. I disappeared, moved to a small town in Montana where no one knew my name. I tried to start over, but I couldn't stop thinking about her, about the woman I had risked everything for, about the woman who had risked everything for me. I found her 3 years later. She was living in Canada under a new name, working as a translator. When I knocked on her door, she didn't seem surprised to see me. She just looked at me with those pale blue eyes and said, "You took your time." We didn't talk about Moscow. We didn't talk about the mission or the betrayals or the people we used to be. We just sat together in the quiet of her small apartment and drank tea. And for the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. People ask me sometimes if it was worth it, if I regret what I did, if I would do it again. And I never know how to answer, because the truth is, I lost everything. I lost my career, my identity, my country. I became a traitor to the only life I had ever known. But I gained something too, something I didn't even know I was looking for. I gained the only person in the world who understood me, who saw me, who knew what it meant to stand on the edge of everything you believe in and choose to jump. They say love can move mountains. But for me, it moved borders. It erased everything I once believed in and left me standing between 2 worlds, belonging to neither. And maybe that's the truth of it. Maybe love isn't about finding your place. Maybe it's about realizing that the only place you ever needed to be was beside the one person who saw you when you were invisible. The one person who stood in front of a gun for you. The one person who made you remember that beneath all the secrets and the lies and the blood, you were still human. I keep Irina's red scarf with me. Even now, even after all these years. I keep it folded in my pocket, a reminder of where I came from and who I became. A reminder that I made a choice. And that choice cost me everything. But it also gave me everything not, because in the end, I didn't fall in love with a Russian assassin. I fell in love with the only person who understood what it meant to be a ghost. And together, we became real again. Some nights, I still wake up in a cold sweat, my heart pounding, my mind replaying those final moments in the freight car. I see the blood, the bodies, the look in Irina's eyes when she stepped in front of me. And I wonder if I did the right thing. If I should just let her go. If I should have walked away and finished the mission the way I was trained to. But then I feel her breathing beside me, warm and steady in the darkness. And I know that whatever I lost, whatever I sacrificed, it was worth it. Because I'm not alone anymore. And neither is she. They tell you in training that the enemy is faceless. That loyalty to your country is absolute. That love is a weakness you cannot afford. But they never tell you what happens when the enemy has a face you can't forget. When loyalty becomes a cage. When love doesn't feel like weakness. It feels like the only truth left in a world built on lies. I'm Michael Reed. I was a spy. And this is my confession.